This is important. You need to see this.
The doctor had just said the word cancer. She hadn't even finished crying when her husband asked her a question that would shatter her life forever. Within weeks, he was gone. Within months, he had married her best friend. But what happened next would prove that some betrayals don't destroy you, they reveal who was never meant to stay. This is the story of Rachel Morgan, a 32-year-old nurse from Portland, Oregon, who spent her entire life believing that loyalty was sacred, that love meant staying through the storms, and that the people closest to you would never abandon you when you needed them most. She was wrong. But her story isn't just about betrayal. It's about what happens when the worst thing imaginable becomes the catalyst for discovering strength you never knew existed. It's about survival, rebirth, and the quiet power that emerges when everything you thought you knew about love is stripped away. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. At the center of this story are three people. A loyal wife who had waited years to become pregnant. A trusted best friend who had been there through every milestone, every tear, every celebration. And a husband who once promised forever but couldn't handle the weight of it when forever suddenly looked uncertain. The questions that haunted everyone who knew them were these. Why did he leave after the diagnosis? How long had the betrayal been growing beneath the surface? Did the best friend plan this, or was she pulled into something she couldn't control? And most importantly, what happened to the woman everyone assumed would not survive? Stay with me, because the truth doesn't reveal itself all at once. And by the time you reach the end of this story, you'll understand why some people exit your life not because you are weak, but because you are about to become unbreakable. Rachel Morgan grew up in a small town in rural Washington state, the daughter of a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep their small apartment warm and the lights on. Her mother taught her that loyalty was everything, that you showed up for people even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Rachel carried that lesson with her through nursing school, through long hospital shifts, through every relationship she ever had. She met David Chin in 2016 at a community health fair where she was volunteering. He was charming, soft-spoken, and had a gentleness about him that made her feel safe. David worked in finance, came from a comfortable family, and seemed genuinely interested in Rachel's passion for helping people. Their courtship was slow and steady. David wasn't the kind of man who made grand gestures or dramatic declarations. He was consistent, reliable, the kind of person you could count on. Or so Rachel thought. They married in the summer of 2018, a small ceremony in a garden with 50 guests, most of them Rachel's nursing colleagues and David's college friends. It was simple, beautiful, and felt like the beginning of everything Rachel had ever wanted. Among the guests was Melissa Harper, Rachel's best friend since their freshman year of college. Melissa had been there through Rachel's mother's death 2 years earlier, had helped plan the wedding, and had cried during Rachel's vows. She was the kind of friend who felt like family, the kind you never questioned, the kind you trusted with your whole heart. The first 3 years of marriage were happy enough. David's career was going well, Rachel loved her work at the hospital, and they lived in a cozy 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. They talked about having children, but Rachel wanted to wait until they were more financially stable, until the timing felt right. Melissa was a constant presence in their lives. She came over for dinner at least once a week, joined them on weekend hikes, and was always the first person Rachel called when something happened, good or bad. David and Melissa got along well, maybe too well, but Rachel never thought anything of it. Why would she? These were the 2 people she trusted most in the world. In early 2023, Rachel discovered she was pregnant. It was unexpected but wanted, a surprise that filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. When she told David, his reaction was measured. He smiled, hugged her, said all the right things, but there was something in his eyes that Rachel couldn't quite read. Hesitation, maybe? Or fear. When she told Melissa, her friend screamed with excitement, immediately started planning a baby shower, and declared herself the future godmother. Everything seemed perfect. Rachel was 5 months pregnant when she started feeling unusually tired, more than the normal pregnancy exhaustion. She noticed bruising on her arms that wouldn't go away, persistent headaches that kept her up at night, and a general feeling that something wasn't right. As a nurse, she knew these symptoms could mean many things, most of them benign. But the voice in the back of her mind kept whispering that she needed to get checked. In late June, Rachel went to her doctor for what she thought would be a routine appointment. Blood tests were ordered. More tests followed. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon that started like any other, Rachel found herself sitting in an oncologist's office, David beside her, holding her hand. The doctor was kind but direct. Rachel had acute myeloid leukemia, a fast-moving cancer of the blood and bone marrow. It was serious, aggressive, and would require immediate treatment. The words felt unreal, like they were being spoken about someone else, in some other room, in some other life. Rachel's first thought was about the baby. The doctor explained that treatment was possible during pregnancy, but it was complicated, risky, and would require a team of specialists. There were no guarantees, not for Rachel's survival, not for the baby's. David sat perfectly still during the entire appointment. He didn't ask questions. He didn't squeeze her hand. He just stared at the wall, his face completely blank. On the drive home, Rachel tried to talk about next steps, about treatment options, about hope. David barely responded. When they got home, he went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. Rachel stood in the kitchen, one hand on her belly, trying to process what was happening. She called Melissa, who came over immediately, wrapped Rachel in her arms, and promised everything would be okay. That night was the first time Rachel felt truly alone in her marriage. The days following the diagnosis were a blur of medical appointments, consultations with specialists, and decisions that felt impossible to make. Rachel was told she would need to start chemotherapy as soon as possible. The doctors believed they could manage the pregnancy while treating the cancer, but the risks were significant. There was a chance the baby wouldn't survive the treatment. There was a chance Rachel wouldn't survive either. But doing nothing wasn't an option. Rachel made the decision to fight, for herself and for her child. David's reaction to all of this was withdrawal. He stopped sleeping in their bedroom, claiming he couldn't sleep and didn't want to disturb Rachel. He stopped going to her appointments, saying work was too demanding. He stopped touching her, stopped looking at her, stopped being present in any meaningful way. Rachel tried to talk to him, tried to understand what was happening, but every conversation ended with him saying he needed time to process, that he was overwhelmed, that he didn't know how to handle this. Melissa, meanwhile, became Rachel's constant companion. She went to every appointment David missed, held Rachel's hand during the first chemotherapy session, brought her ginger tea and saltine crackers when the nausea was unbearable, and stayed overnight when Rachel was too scared to be alone. Rachel was grateful, so grateful, but there was something she couldn't quite name, a shift in the air, a tension she felt but couldn't explain. 3 weeks after Rachel started chemotherapy, David asked her for a divorce. It was a Saturday morning. Rachel was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, trying to keep down a piece of toast. David came into the room, sat in the chair across from her, not beside her, and spoke in a voice so calm it was almost cruel. "I don't think I'm strong enough for this," he said. "I thought I could handle it, but I can't. I can't watch you go through this. I can't raise a child that might not have a mother. I can't live like this." Rachel stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You're leaving me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Now? While I'm pregnant? While I'm fighting cancer?" David looked away. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know the timing is terrible. But staying would be worse. For both of us." He had already talked to a lawyer, he explained. He would make sure she had financial support, at least for a while. He would handle the paperwork. He just couldn't be there anymore. Rachel didn't cry, not then. She was too shocked, too numb. She just nodded, pulled the blanket tighter around herself, and watched as the man she had married walked out of the room, out of the house, and out of her life. David moved out that same day. A week later, Rachel discovered through a mutual friend that David had moved in with Melissa. At first, Rachel didn't believe it. It had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. But when she called Melissa, her best friend didn't deny it. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Melissa said, her voice shaking. "It just did. We were both so stressed, both dealing with so much, and we just connected. I'm sorry, Rachel. I never wanted to hurt you." Rachel hung up the phone and sat in silence for hours. The two people she had trusted most, the two people who were supposed to be there for her, had been building something behind her back while she was fighting for her life. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that Rachel couldn't even find tears. She just felt empty, hollowed out, like everything inside her had been scooped away. 2 months later, while Rachel was still undergoing chemotherapy, still pregnant, still fighting, David and Melissa got married at a courthouse. They didn't tell Rachel. She found out from a Facebook post. The photos showed them smiling, holding hands, Melissa wearing a simple white dress. The caption read, "Sometimes love finds you when you least expect it. Grateful for new beginnings." Rachel stared at that photo for a long time, trying to understand how two people could do this, how they could justify it, how they could be happy while she was barely surviving. And that's when something inside her shifted. The sadness didn't disappear, but underneath it, something harder, something stronger began to emerge. She realized that their betrayal had nothing to do with her worth. It had everything to do with their weakness, their inability to face hardship, their choice to prioritize comfort over character. If you're still here, comment, "I'm still watching," because the hardest part of this story has just begun. And what happens next will show you why some women don't just survive, they transform. Rachel made a decision that night. She wasn't going to let them take anything else from her. Not her strength, not her hope, not her future. She was going to fight, not for them, not to prove anything to them, but for herself and for the child growing inside her. She stopped checking their social media. She stopped asking mutual friends about them. She focused entirely on her treatment, on her pregnancy, on putting one foot in front of the other every single day. The chemotherapy was brutal. There were days when Rachel couldn't get out of bed, days when the nausea was so intense she couldn't keep down even water, days when she looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. Her hair fell out in clumps. Her skin turned pale and thin. Her body was fighting a war on two fronts, battling cancer while growing a human being. But through it all, Rachel showed up. She went to every appointment. She followed every protocol. She visualized her body healing, her baby growing strong. Her medical team was amazed by her resilience, by her determination to do everything possible to give her child a chance. One of her oncologists, Dr. Sarah Kim, told her something that stayed with her. "Rachel, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've learned that survival isn't just about medicine. It's about having something to fight for that's bigger than the fear. You have that. Your baby has the strongest mother I've ever seen." The months that followed were the loneliest of Rachel's life. While her body fought cancer and nurtured life simultaneously, she had to navigate a world that suddenly felt foreign and hostile. The community she and David had been part of didn't know how to handle the situation. Some people sided with David, repeating his narrative that he had been overwhelmed, that he had a right to protect his own mental health, that leaving was the brave thing to do. Others whispered about Melissa, calling her a home wrecker, questioning her morals. But very few people actually showed up for Rachel. It was as if her situation was too uncomfortable, too messy, too heavy for anyone to want to get involved. There were exceptions, of course. Rachel's nursing colleagues became her lifeline. They organized a meal train, making sure she had food when she was too sick to cook. They took turns driving her to appointments when she was too weak to drive herself. They celebrated every small victory, every clear scan, every week the pregnancy progressed. Her neighbor, an elderly woman named Dorothy who had survived breast cancer 15 years earlier, became an unexpected source of wisdom. Dorothy would sit with Rachel on the porch in the evenings, not saying much, just being present, a quiet reminder that survival was possible, that life could continue even after everything fell apart. Rachel's pregnancy progressed against all odds. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic, but they warned her repeatedly that there were no guarantees. The chemotherapy drugs, while chosen carefully to minimize harm, could still affect the baby's development. There could be complications during delivery. The baby might be born premature, underweight, with health issues of their own. But week after week, the ultrasound showed a baby who was growing, thriving, fighting just as hard as Rachel was. In her 7th month of pregnancy, Rachel hit a low point. The cumulative effects of the chemotherapy had left her body exhausted. She developed an infection that required hospitalization, and for several days, her medical team wasn't sure if she was going to make it. During one of those nights in the hospital, hooked up to machines, barely able to keep her eyes open, Rachel thought about giving up. It would be so easy, she thought, to just let go, to stop fighting, to surrender to the exhaustion. But then she felt the baby move inside her, a strong kick against her ribs, and she remembered why she was still here. This child didn't ask to be born into these circumstances. This child deserved a chance, deserved a mother who fought. So Rachel kept fighting. She spent 3 weeks in the hospital before she was stable enough to go home. During that time, she learned that David had stopped making the financial support payments he had promised. His lawyer sent a letter claiming financial hardship, suggesting that Rachel apply for state assistance instead. The cruelty of it was almost impressive. Here was a man who had left his pregnant, cancer-stricken wife, married her best friend, and was now trying to avoid even basic financial responsibility. Rachel hired a lawyer, not because she wanted to fight David, but because she needed to protect her child. The legal process was slow and frustrating, but eventually, a court order was put in place mandating child support. It wasn't much, but it was something, a small acknowledgement that David had obligations, whether he wanted to honor them or not. Throughout all of this, Rachel kept a journal. She wrote letters to her unborn child, explaining what was happening, why things were the way they were, what she hoped for their future. She wrote about the kind of person she wanted her child to become, about the lessons she hoped to teach about resilience, about choosing courage over comfort, about the fact that people will show you who they are if you pay attention. In her 8th month of pregnancy, Rachel's cancer went into remission. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, emphasizing that remission didn't mean cured, that she would need ongoing monitoring, that the cancer could return. But for now, her body was winning the fight. The relief was overwhelming. Rachel allowed herself to cry for the first time in months, not tears of sadness but tears of gratitude, of hope, of the realization that she might actually survive this, that her child might actually have a mother. 1 week before her due date, Rachel ran into Melissa at the grocery store. It was the first time they had seen each other face to face since the phone call months earlier. Melissa's eyes widened when she saw Rachel's very pregnant belly, the visible effects of chemotherapy still evident in Rachel's thin frame and absent hair covered by a soft beanie. "Rachel," Melissa started, her voice uncertain. "I've wanted to reach out. I've wanted to explain." Rachel looked at her former best friend, this woman who had been present for so much of her life, who had betrayed her in the deepest way possible. And she felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a profound indifference. "There's nothing to explain," Rachel said quietly. "You made your choice. I hope it was worth it." She walked past Melissa without another word, continuing her shopping, focusing on the list in her hand. That night she wrote in her journal about the encounter, about how strange it was to feel nothing where there had once been so much love, so much trust. She realized that indifference was the final stage of healing, the moment when someone's actions no longer had the power to touch you. 2 days later, Rachel went into labor. It was early morning, the sun just beginning to rise. She called Dorothy, who drove her to the hospital, staying with her until Rachel's nursing colleagues arrived. The delivery was long and difficult, Rachel's body weakened by months of treatment. But at 6:30 in the evening, on a Tuesday in late November, Rachel gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her Hope Margaret Morgan. Hope, for the obvious reasons. Margaret, after Rachel's mother, the woman who had taught her that loyalty and strength were the most important things you could possess. Holding Hope in her arms for the first time, Rachel understood something profound. She thought cancer would end her story. But betrayal was the fire that revealed her strength. This tiny person, this miracle who had survived chemotherapy in the womb, who had fought alongside her mother every single day, was proof that some things are stronger than circumstances. In the months after Hope's birth, Rachel's life slowly began to rebuild. She returned to work part-time, her colleagues eager to have her back and understanding of her need for flexibility. She continued her cancer monitoring appointments, each clear scan a gift. She learned how to be a single mother, how to function on very little sleep, how to find joy in small moments. Meanwhile, about 6 months after Hope was born, Rachel started hearing things through the community network that still connected their overlapping worlds. David and Melissa's marriage was struggling. The reality of their relationship, built on the foundation of abandonment and betrayal, was not holding up under the weight of ordinary life. Melissa had apparently expected David to be the stable, dependable man Rachel had described. Instead, she discovered what Rachel had learned too late. David was someone who ran when things got hard. When Melissa experienced her own health scare, a false alarm that turned out to be nothing serious, David's response was eerily familiar. He withdrew, became distant, couldn't handle the stress of even the possibility of illness. Melissa confided in a mutual acquaintance that she finally understood what Rachel had gone through, that she had made a terrible mistake, that she wished she could take it all back. Rachel heard these stories secondhand and felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. Not sadness for herself, but sadness for the waste of it all, for the unnecessary pain, for the choices that had been made out of weakness rather than strength. David eventually reached out, about a year after Hope was born. He sent a letter, not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter. In it, he apologized. He said he had been a coward, that he had let fear control him, that he had destroyed the best thing in his life because he couldn't face the possibility of loss. He said he wanted to meet Hope, to be part of her life if Rachel would allow it. He said he was in therapy, working on himself, trying to understand why he had made the choices he did. Rachel read the letter twice, then put it in a drawer. She didn't respond immediately. She took her time, thought about what was best for Hope, consulted with a therapist of her own. Eventually she did respond, but on her terms. She agreed to supervised visitation, to David having a limited role in Hope's life, but made it clear that trust would have to be earned, slowly, over time, through consistent action, not words. David agreed to her terms. The visit started, awkward and stilted at first. Hope was too young to understand who this man was, why he mattered. David tried, showed up consistently, brought age-appropriate gifts, asked questions about Hope's development. Rachel watched carefully, looking for signs of the man who had abandoned her, looking for the moment he would disappear again when things got difficult. Melissa never reached out directly, but Rachel heard through others that she and David had divorced about 18 months after they married. Melissa had moved to another state, trying to start over somewhere where people didn't know her story. Rachel felt no satisfaction in this news, no sense of justice served. She had moved beyond needing them to suffer. She had moved beyond needing anything from them at all. What Rachel did feel was gratitude. Gratitude that their betrayal had happened when it did, revealing their true characters before Hope was old enough to be hurt by them. Gratitude that she had been forced to discover her own strength, her own capacity to survive, her own ability to build a life without depending on anyone else's approval or presence. Gratitude that Hope would grow up watching a mother who chose courage, who faced impossible circumstances and didn't run, who proved that love means staying even when it's hard. Dr. Kim, Rachel's oncologist, told her during one of her follow-up appointments that she was approaching the 3-year remission mark, a significant milestone. "You're a medical miracle, Rachel," Dr. Kim said. "But more than that, you're proof that the human spirit is stronger than any diagnosis, any betrayal, any circumstance. Hope is lucky to have you." Rachel smiled, thinking about how lucky she was to have Hope, how her daughter had given her a reason to fight when every logical reason said to give up. 5 years after that terrible Tuesday when the doctor first said the word cancer, Rachel sat on a park bench watching Hope play on the playground. Hope was a bright, energetic 5-year-old who loved dinosaurs and asking impossible questions and making up elaborate stories about the adventures her stuffed animals had while she was at school. Rachel's hair had grown back, different than before, clear and with streaks of gray that she had decided not to hide. Her body still carried the scars of treatment, visible and invisible, but it was strong again, capable again. Her cancer remained in remission, and while she knew it could always return, she had learned not to let that fear control her life. She had learned to live in the present, to find joy in ordinary moments, to appreciate every single day as the gift it was. David continued to see Hope twice a month, supervised visits that had gradually become less supervised as he proved his consistency. Rachel was cordial with him, nothing more. They would never be friends, would never have the kind of co-parenting relationship some divorced couples managed, but they had found a way to function for Hope's sake. He had remarried, to someone new, and Rachel genuinely hoped he had learned from his mistakes, though she suspected people rarely changed as much as they claimed to. Rachel had started a support group for women facing serious illness while pregnant, a small gathering that met once a month at the hospital where she worked. She shared her story, listened to theirs, offered hope without sugarcoating the reality of how hard it was. Many of the women told her that just knowing someone had survived what they were facing gave them strength to keep fighting. That gave Rachel more satisfaction than almost anything else, the knowledge that her pain had purpose, that her story could light the way for someone else walking a similar path. She had also started dating, tentatively, slowly, with significant walls in place. A pediatrician named Michael who worked at the same hospital had asked her to dinner 6 months earlier, and they had been seeing each other casually since then. He knew her story, all of it, and didn't run. He was patient with her guardedness, understood why trust didn't come easily, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her, not fixing her or saving her, just being present. It was different from what she had with David, less intense maybe, but also more honest, more grounded in reality. Hope called out from the playground, "Mommy, watch this!" And Rachel watched as her daughter navigated the monkey bars with determination, falling once, getting back up, trying again. Rachel thought about how much Hope was like her, that stubborn refusal to give up, that belief that trying one more time might make the difference. And she thought about the question that had haunted her in those early days: what if she had given up? What if she had let the cancer win, or let the betrayal destroy her, or decided that fighting was too hard? She would have missed this. All of this. The ordinary miracle of watching her daughter play, of feeling the sun on her face, of knowing that she had survived not just cancer but something equally devastating, the loss of everyone she thought would be there forever. Some people exit your life not because you are weak, but because you are about to become unbreakable. Rachel understood that now. David and Melissa had left because they couldn't handle the weight of real love, the kind that stays through suffering, the kind that chooses the other person even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Their leaving revealed their character, not hers. And in a strange way, their betrayal had been a gift. It forced Rachel to discover that she didn't need anyone else to validate her worth, that she was strong enough to stand alone, that she could build a life on her own terms. She learned that survival is not just about making it through, it's about who you become in the process. Rachel had become someone she was proud of, someone her daughter could look up to, someone who proved that your worst day doesn't have to define you. Hope ran over, breathless and excited, and climbed into Rachel's lap. "I did it, Mommy! I went all the way across!" Rachel hugged her daughter tight, breathing in the smell of her hair, feeling the solid weight of her, this person who existed because Rachel had refused to give up. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," Rachel said. "You kept trying even when it was hard." Hope looked up at her with those serious eyes that saw more than most 5-year-olds. "Just like you did, Mommy. You told me you kept trying even when you were sick." Rachel's eyes filled with tears, the good kind. "That's right, baby. Just like I did. So let me ask you this. What would you have done in Rachel's place? When the person you loved most walked away during your darkest hour, when your best friend betrayed you in the deepest way possible, when your body was fighting for survival and your heart was shattered, would you have found the strength to keep going? How do you think you would feel watching your life fall apart while growing a child inside you? And more importantly, do you believe that betrayal can be a gift in disguise, revealing who was never meant to stay? Rachel's story is a reminder that love that leaves during storms was never love at all. That strength doesn't announce itself with grand gestures but shows up in quiet, daily choices to keep going. That survival is not just about making it through but about who you become in the process. Where are you watching from? Have you ever faced a betrayal that ultimately made you stronger? What would you say to someone going through what Rachel went through? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you of the incredible resilience of the human spirit, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for watching Western Stories, where we share tales that touch your heart and stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Subscribe for more stories of survival, transformation, and the quiet power that emerges when everything falls apart. Because sometimes, the people who leave make room for the person you were always meant to become. I'll see you in the next one.